thanks, Rob, for being on the show. Thank you.
Pleasure.
I'm Jason Butler, and I've been running this podcast for just over a year now, and I've been having some really intimate and interesting conversations with people about the role of money in their life, what they've learned, and so on. So it's really great for Rob to be on the show. He's a bit of an icon. I have seen him live. If you've not seen him live, go and see him live. Buy his books. Basically, everything about him is great, but he is a bit of a Marmite character. But I like that. You've got to be something rather than nothing. So thanks for being on the show, Rob. Okay, so any of the people on my podcast who don't know who you are, do you want to just explain, just before we do the deep dive going back, as to what you currently do now, what you're up to and what you're involved in?
Well, at the moment, I'm taking another mini retirement. I've taken a few of those in my life to focus more. I've built a studio at home, a music listening room and studio where I can do YouTube, Facebook, Zoom, etc. lives. I'm going to connect back to finding some passions outside of business. Like I'm going to start a martial art again. I'm going to probably take up golf again. And I'm probably going to take a 6-month or so mini retirement. That's where I am right now. Now, anyone who's followed me for years has seen me take a few mini or semi-retirements over the years. And I'm in the fortunate position where I became a millionaire between age 30 and 31. So financially, it's been 10 years plus since I kind of needed any more money or became financially free, if you like. Before literally the lockdown, you could call me an author because I'd written 16 books. I'm currently just editing 17, 18 and 19 as we speak. My podcast, The Disruptive Entrepreneur, is a very successful podcast in the UK, so you could call me a podcaster. I broke the world record for the longest individual speech and the longest team speech. And I've done 1,100 public speeches. So you could call me a public speaker. I suppose what am I transcending all of that is I'm an entrepreneur. Now, an entrepreneur is defined in the dictionary as someone who takes risk in the hope of profit. And I would add to that, someone who takes risk in the belief that they're going to get profit, not the hope, and in multiple disciplines. So I think a business person might have one company, but I think an entrepreneur loves to start things and loves to build multiple companies. And then my personal vision is to help as many people on the planet get a better financial education and start and scale their business. And I have a foundation that's helping young and underprivileged and startup entrepreneurs get their meaningful mission, message, and business out to the masses. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, I have a few hundred properties as well. I started as a property investor, 15 years ago, but really that's managed by our letting agency and my business partner. So I'm not so hands-on on that.
So really, you've not done a lot. You're not really aiming high, and really, you're a bit of a loser, right? Okay, but we take all sorts here. That's fine, Rob.
Yeah, well, I think my haters think I'm a loser, Jason. So yeah. Bring it on.
No, the thing is, it's a very, very packed life. Very interesting. That's why I want to get you on the show. And I have heard you tell lots of stories, but I need to really get those stories to a wider audience because entrepreneurialism isn't the only route to wealth, right? But it's one route to wealth, and it's one route to realizing not just wealth, but also your way in life. So look, take me back, because I've not actually heard the story about when you were really young, when you were first growing up. What were your first associations and experiences and memories of money?
So when I was 6 years old, my dad got me working in his pub, and I absolutely loved it. Look up to my dad. He was such a successful pub landlord, bar, restaurant, club, hotel owner. And he'd get me down in the pub in the early morning, started with like vacuuming. And that was all right for a while. The carpet in one of the pubs, people would drop pound coins on the floor and you couldn't see them because of the colour of the carpet. So I'd find a load of pound coins and I loved it. And then Dad would get me emptying the tills and counting and bagging up the money. And he'd be like, "How much did we take last night, son?" As if I was sort of like a partner in his business. He'd get me emptying the pool tables, the fruit machines, the pinball machines, and counting all the money and bagging it up when the 50p's were like huge. You remember the old 10p's, which were huge?
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved it. And it'd pay me £1 a week, and I'd go down to the pound shop and I'd buy a picture of a Ferrari one week, a picture of a Lamborghini another week, a picture of a Corvette another week. And that's where I guess I started a love for entrepreneurship and money and cars and all those kind of things. And I was working all the way through till probably 21. Even at university, I was working in the pub through the week, i.e. the Rat and Parrot pub at university. And in the weekends, I'd drive home and work at my dad's pub. But then went back to my mum and dad's pub after uni because dad wasn't very well. So what was I, 21 then? And then for 4 years I worked there, earning 200 quid a week, getting more in debt. I'd already built a lot of debt from university, so I got 50 grand in debt at one point, and just lost my way. I knew I didn't want to work in a pub pulling pints my whole life, but I guess I'd forgotten how my dad had raised me to be an entrepreneur. And then December the 15th, 2005, my dad had this massive nervous breakdown just outside the front of his pub, in front of all of his customers. The police beat him up and sectioned him. And it was quite a horrific experience for me, my mum, my sister, who were all out in the front watching the police do this and watching my dad go through this. And my dad had worked for 35 years in the pub leisure, trade. Smoking ban really hurt his business. When supermarkets got licenses, that really hurt his business. And then, over the years, people stopped going to pub. Everyone used to go to a pub, didn't they, to socialise 20 years ago in England. Yeah. But there's bars, there's restaurants, there's bistros, there's people are doing Zooms now. So year by year, the pub trade got much harder. And then, so dad just ground himself down, really. And to see that was quite horrific for me. So it just shamed and guilted and embarrassed and humiliated me into thinking I've got to do something with my life. And I didn't know what or how, but I just knew I had to do something. And that kick-started a chain reaction of events. I went to a property networking event. I met my business partner.
Hold on a minute, Rob. Rob, before we go on there, that's great. I just want to go back a little bit, if we can. I'm not going to let you off the hook. And thank you for being very open about your family situation. I know you said that before, and anyone suffering that is a traumatic situation. And that's just luck, right? That stuff happens. You can't odds that. And sometimes luck does come along. But just go back tell me about how you got into the debt. What was the stories that you were telling yourself? What were the habits that you developed? How did it happen?
So I got into debt slowly. And I think sometimes you feel like you can get into debt quick, but you often don't. You only need to spend a couple of £100 more than you earn each month. And 5-10 years down the line with compounding, that can be 20, 50, 100 grand's worth of debt. So I guess I was probably clean of debt at 18. Then you get your credit cards, you go to university, you get your overdrafts, and you just go out a bit too much and you spend a bit too much money. You've got to pay for your halls of residence, your living expenses. I mean, I was the year before you had to pay your fees. If I'd have had to pay my fees, I'd be 75 grand in debt, or I would have been 75 grand in debt. But it was just spending too much on drink and socializing, just your student accommodation and all that. And that building up over 3 years. Then when I came home, I got a car. So I got a 10 grand loan for a car. And of course, I sold that for 3.5 grand 3 years later and still had the loan for 2 to 3 years beyond that. I'd get my pay packet and I'd put the cash in the bank, but I'd buy some clothes or going out on a credit card. And so you earn 200 quid a week, but you spend 250. And so it just built up and compounded. And then what you do is you take a 0% credit card to pay off your old credit card, but then you have to pay fees to do that. And then you get to the end of the interest-free period, and then the interest is really high. So I didn't have any understanding of interest, of negative compounding, etc. I didn't budget. I didn't manage my money. I didn't manage my money emotions. I talk a lot about managing your money emotions. So what a lot of people do is when they're feeling a bit shitty, they'll go out and they'll go and drink themselves silly, or they'll go and buy some clothes or some things that make themselves feel better. I was that guy. And then if you have a good week, you go and celebrate and spend all your money on celebrating. And I was that guy. So low emotions and high emotions, I was spending money I didn't have to compound that feeling. So that's how it happened.
Okay, well that is very common, isn't it? But to what extent were your spending decisions and your racking up debt in those early days at uni, to what extent were you influenced also by people around you, as opposed to how you felt within, but also the people around you and your need to feel connected and part of them, and because there is a problem when you're young, you want to be connected. You're finding your way, aren't you? You're trying to find out who you are, and also you're trying to make friendships and connections. So to what extent did that figure, or did that not figure at all?
Well, I think it figured very largely. So I have this belief that people will spend money according to their values, i.e. what they deem as most important to them in their life, they will spend their money on. If health is the most important thing to you, you'll spend loads of money on organic food and supplements and blah, blah, blah. If success is important to you, you'll invest it in a business, or you'll buy things that make you look outwardly successful. If family is most important to you, you'll buy an £800 pushchair. You'll convince yourself you need that when you don't. And so I believe people spend according to their voids and values. Now, if you don't feel good about yourself and your worth, I believe you'll spend money to try and make yourself feel better about yourself. That could be designer clothes. That could be treating people and buying dinner and buying drinks all the time when you go out so that people think well of you. So I bought a Mazda 323 Sport. It was a car way above my affordability, but I got a loan and I got the car. So yeah, when I was in my teens and mid-20s, I was spending money basically to have other people perceive me well. So then when they perceive me well, I felt good about myself. Whereas my business partner, he had a £19 brown Vauxhall Nova for years, like 5 years. I think he got it at 17, I think, but he drove it all through uni. He paid £19. The auction fee was double the price of the car, and he'd do the oil change himself. And he felt that made him look good because he had a car for 5 years, which cost him about 65 quid a year, because his importance around money is saving, investing and protecting capital, because that's how his dad had raised him. Whereas I was spending money on £500 suits when I only earned £200 a week to look good and to feel good. So yeah, I was definitely doing that. And a lot of people say I'm very generous, and I am very generous. But for many years, my generosity was to get people to like me. Now my generosity is because I want to feel good and do good things. Like I have this rule: whenever I go out for dinner with anyone, I always pay, whether it's like a burger for 20 quid, or whether it's 2-star Michelin for 500 quid. I don't care. I'm always the one that wants to pay. One, because I couldn't afford to go out in 2005, and two, because it's just something I like to do because it makes me feel good. But yeah, Look, I have a £300,000 Lamborghini Aventador. I have a 1987 Ferrari Testarossa. I've had £100,000 watches. So there's still an element of me that is spending money on things that make me feel good, and is how people perceive me linked to how good I feel. Well, yes, it is. And that's not necessarily ego or shame or pain. It's just we're an interdependent species. So, we meet people, we see people think about us and judge us. But I think if you're going to be comfortable about who you are and not have to prove who you are, and have worth from within and not need to get worth from without, ultimately you'll probably spend and invest your money more wisely. But, some people buy £100 face creams. So it's not just about cars and watches, and it's everything. Some people buy designer clothes. Some people buy nice shoes and handbags. So I think to manage your money well, it is wise to find out what your values are, what's most important to you in your life, and what voids you're trying to fill, which are usually linked to your values, and try and stop the emotional spending or the spending to fill that hole which never fills.
So let's just go back to that bit when you got, if I can put it, not bottom, but you were low. You'd had the family situation with your dad. You were racking up all the debt, and then you had, what did you have, an epiphany? What was the catalyst for you to decide, first of all, that you needed to change? And secondly, how clear were you what good was going to look like? In other words, what was the alternative? Was there a really clear path, or did you just think, I just got to take a different step today?
Yeah. So there was no path. So picture being outside the front of a big pub with big bay windows, with customers who are also my dad's only friends peering through. It being frosty outside. It was December 15th. And two policemen wrestling my dad to the floor and beating him with batons, and me, my sister and my mum watching it, not able to do anything about it, and then literally tying him up and chucking him in the back of a police van, sectioning him, and then not able to properly see him for weeks. That for me was an event that I wouldn't have said it wasn't like in the movies, where the lights go down and there's a spotlight on you and the Old Spice music comes out and you get the da, 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 da epiphany. It wasn't like that. It was just shame and pain and sadness. And that turned into me beating myself up because Dad had raised me to be an entrepreneur. He paid for stuff for me my whole life. He paid me through private school. Anytime I needed money, he gave it to me. He gave me a job in his pub. He paid me cash in hand. And I was not stepping up. I was not successful. I was not doing what I was meant to do. I was not making my dad proud. So over days, maybe a week, I was like, I don't know what, but I have to do something. And at the time I was sort of struggling with my art, trying to do art evenings and weekends as well as doing the pub.
Because that was your hobby, wasn't it? You're very creative.
Well, I was also selling paintings. So it wasn't like, but I couldn't get rid of the debt. So just one sec. My son's just playing Fortnite and he's making a racket. I'm just going to shut the door. So, I can't, it'd take me too long to explain that week and what happened. And it'd be a bit blurry because it was 15 years ago. But in that week, I went from guilt and shame and pain and sadness and loss and feeling like a victim to anger to motivation. And so at some point I was like, right, now's the time. And I guess I probably connected back to when I was 6, 8, 10, when my dad was getting me to do all this entrepreneurial stuff. And I loved it. And I was like, right, okay, I need to take responsibility. So the first thing I said was, I have to get out of the pub. And it wasn't like I wanted to quit working for my mum and dad. It was just like, I have to get out of the pub and do something for myself on my own to make my dad proud. Now, when you start making decisions and you start taking opportunities, it's amazing that you remember things that people had said or given you or instructed or guided that you ignored because you've tuned into a different part of your brain. So one of them was, for years, my dad and a gallery owner who had some of my work, Mike Wildman, had been saying, son, get into property, Rob, get into property, literally probably since 98. Of course, in 2005, everyone was in property, weren't they? So I heard this all of a sudden, get into property. My dad said I should get into property. Mike has. All right. So Mike, the gallery owner who was in properties, he said, there's a property networking event going on next week. So I went to it. I never would have gone to it as an artist. I mean, anyway, I went there and the last person...
How's it, Rob? That's interesting. You just said, I would have never have gone there as an artist. So therefore you'd already said to yourself, and many people do, that your identity, you had this identity that you thought precluded you from doing property investing.
Yeah, well, I mean, an identity, I'm an artist. Also, I don't have any money. So, a belief of actually not being able to do it. Right. But also, if I'm honest, I was quite anti anyone who was successful. I'm trying to figure this out in my head. I think I was jealous, but I don't think I was jealous because I was jealous. I think I was jealous because I was shamed about myself. But anyone who drive a Ferrari, drug dealer. Anyone who's successful, they must have screwed people over. Anyone who was a property developer or a property investor, they just, they're like these evil Rackman landlords or whatever. So I always had, I always had a negative story to dismiss opportunity, because if I had to face that opportunity, that would prove to myself that I had failed. But then when this happened with my dad, I had nothing to lose. So I had anger and pain turned into motivation. So I was like, well, it's almost like, fuck it, let's try it. 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 And I was just like, well, we've got nothing to lose. And I started listening to people I wouldn't have listened to. I started hanging around with people I wouldn't have hung around with. I went to this property networking event, end of 2005. First one I ever went to, and I met my business partner, Mark Homer, there, the last guy in the bar. We own hundreds of properties together. We've made hundreds of millions of pounds and gross. And that all started that day, which was probably a week or 10 days after my dad's breakdown. So no, I didn't know what it was going to be. And no, I didn't know how it was going to be. I just had the pain-driven motivation to go and search. So I go to this property networking event I never would have gone to. I met a guy who I never would have been interested in because he was a businessman and I would have always dismissed those. Then he gave me 3 books to read. I read them in a week. I'd never have read those kind of books. I went to see him in his office, met his boss, and I pitched myself to get a job. I never would have worked at any place like that before, selling property investment to investors. I forged a friendship I never would have forged. Then we set up on our own when I never would have done it. And it just sort of, we've got the largest property training company in the UK, Progressive Property, that never would have started. 16 books of author, they never would have happened. So it's funny how your life can take these new courses and routes, and you can look at opportunities you never would have seen when your mind is open to them.
So interesting. The pain got so much, and you took the first step. Now, that's a really important takeaway for people. When the pain gets so much and you are not prepared to, it's because I think it was Neville, who's on one of your shows recently.
Neville Wright.
Yeah. And he said, you've got to make a decision. Yeah, good friend, I know. And he said a really great line, which was, you've got to also not just know what you do want, but also what you are not prepared to put up with. That was and I heard you say that before. So the pain was too much. You didn't have a big plan. You just took one step forward that was different and beyond your comfort zone. So how important do you think, Gary Player said, didn't he, luck, the more I practice, the luckier I get. To what extent do you think luck plays a part in people's relationship with money and how they the kind of lifestyle they lead and the choices they have?
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to luck. I wrote a book called Start Now, Get Perfect Later. And I have trained, coached, spoken to, it's not an exaggeration to say hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs. And too many people are looking for the perfect plan before they start. You cannot create the perfect plan before you start. You can only adapt and evolve a plan that becomes better over time. Therefore, you need to start now and build as you go. And I think the breakdown that my dad had, that got me into that phase of so much pain, I had nothing to lose, which helped. Because if I'd have been 42 and 3 kids and a massive mortgage and 2 car loans, that would have been different. So you could argue timing was lucky for me there, Jason, because I was 25 living with my parents. Yeah, debt, but didn't have a massive amount to lose. So I think you create the plan on the way as you go, not before you go. Otherwise, you never start. So that's something that in all walks of life help you. And then the next thing with luck, I think luck is not a binary or a simple definition. So I'm just going to give you a few thoughts on luck. I think that through our lives, we're all likely to have good things that happen to us that we perceive as lucky and bad things that happen to us that we perceive are unlucky. And I think over our lives, many of us are going to get our share of those. I also think, I do believe in some kind of attraction or manifestation, or that you attract into your life what you put out to your life. You create opportunities, meetings, journeys, openings based on your decisions and actions. So I'm not a particular believer in predestination or destiny. I'm more a believer in continued creation based on thoughts, decisions, and actions. Now, if you want to take ultimate responsibility for your life, ultimate responsibility, I think you have to park a belief of luck. Ultimate responsibility is I create everything: good, bad, right, wrong, lucky, unlucky. That's ultimate responsibility. Cause and effect, i.e. I am the cause and I create the effect. But there's no doubt timing can be seen as fortunate looking back. And meetings, like my meeting with Mark Homer, first networking event I ever went to, a load of people could say, oh, well, Rob, I've been to 50 or 60 and I haven't met my Mark Homer. So I'd have to thank the universe and be grateful for that opportunity. But you could argue I was looking for it so hard, or you could argue that I made it happen. I don't really know yet. I feel grateful and blessed that I met him. Do I feel lucky? Well, honestly, I'd have met him at some point because I was so motivated. And by the way, we had to work at our relationship, and we still have to work at our relationship. So there probably are chance things that seem serendipitous or fortuitous. There are probably chance things that seem hard and negative and down. But I think if you want to be someone who creates opportunity and you want to be in control fully of your own life, you have to own everything that happens in your life. And everything that seems to be all perceived downside, you have to see the upside. And then everything that looks like it's upside, you have to see some downside.
Well, the Stoics say you have to accept, first of all, the only thing you can control is your response and your judgments. Everything else is as it will be. But you're absolutely right. And I've seen from all the people I've interviewed over all the years, and I've interviewed about 1,400 people in.
Wow.
That's a lot, right? About their money.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of conversations with people, and you're right. It's how you react to things, and it's how you, the stories you tell yourself. So segueing then into the next bit, really, which is I'm fascinated to hear about, is not just the, overnight success in 15 years, because it was hard work, right? And I want to hear about some of the missteps, the obstacles, the mistakes, the problems, because I think sometimes people think that good outcomes, they only see the good times, right? They only see the outcomes when it's all gone right. They don't see necessarily how you deal with adversity and how you develop resilience. So do you want to just touch on a few money-related things there? You don't have to go into the actual numbers, but just a story or two that might give us a sense of how you've reacted to that, because life is full of disappointments, right?
Yeah. So I'm the sort of person that will try something, and if I'm in doubt, I will test it out. So I see my journey in business and entrepreneurship as a continual experiment. And once you figure out one experiment, it might work for a while and then it might not, or there's always a new experiment to carry out. Marketing, sales, recruitment, growth, strategy, etc., podcasting, writing books. So in that regard, you could argue I've not really failed other than testing to figure out what works and by default and definition ticking off things that don't. I've never gone bust. Mark and I have never lost money that's been loaned to us. We've never had any major epic failure in business, but I've made lots of little mistakes.
So, okay, that might be small. You go small with something, and if it is a blow up or a problem, you cut it at the legs before it becomes can do any more damage.
Well, yeah. I like to try and fail fast, frequently, and safely. It'd be nice if there was a word that begins with F for safe. So I'd rather fail quickly, get out the way, because it's not going to be massive if it's quick. I'd rather it be small, not big. And I'd rather it be relatively often so I can learn and adapt rather than successful for 3 years and then a massive epic failure. And so I have a more iterative, experimental, progressive journey of failure. I get asked all the time, Rob, what's your biggest failure in business? But I haven't got a massive failure in business. I've got loads of little ones. And I can give you some specific examples. So it also, by the way, depends how you view failure. If you view failure as feedback, there is no failure. It is just part of a journey. I really believe you can't succeed your way to success. It's impossible. No one succeeds first time. You can't succeed your way to success. You have to fail your way to success. So if you think about playing an instrument, how many times you need to practice? You fail 1,000 times before you get the chords right on the guitar. So one thing that is clear to a lot of people in my property training industry is the amount of partnerships we've had. So we probably had 30 partnerships, speakers, trainers, partners. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I'd say 3 higher profile, and then maybe 1 to, let's say, 5 to 10, not very high profile at all, partners and speakers that have worked with us in partnership, but then have moved on. Some because they wanted to set up in competition, some because they wanted to change industry, some because we had to let them go because there was an indiscretion or there was something around their past or whatever. Now, critics of my company would go, oh, look at all those failed partnerships and their speakers that they have in, and then they end up leaving. But we've got dozens of speakers, partners, trainers who've been with us for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years or longer, who are very loyal to us and we're very loyal to them. So, if you want to grow globally as a training business, you need dozens of partnerships. You need promoters, you need people who run the events, you need marketers, you need agencies, you need speakers, you need trainers. So each one of those partnerships, Mark and I and Catherine, our MD, we always look at them and go, what could we have done better? Did we go wrong there? Were we a bit defensive? Was their perception accurate? But in reality, partnerships come and go. So I could actually look back at that with a stoic attitude. The stoic attitude would be, we did nothing wrong. It was exactly as it should be. Because to try and think that something should have been different is the opposite of a stoic mentality. Stoicism would be, you cannot wish for anything to be other than it is. So therefore, I can't perceive them as mistakes. I just have to perceive them as part of the journey. Now, are there things I would do differently? Yes. And will I have future partnerships that might break? Yes. But what a lot of people do is they have a partnership, it breaks, and they go, well, partnerships don't work, or I should just work on my own, or I'm never going to have a partner again because people always screw me over, and then they can't grow.
They let one event define them. Yeah.
Sorry,
I was just going to say, talking on the partnerships, but go back to the Mark situation. When you met Mark, you had 50 grand's worth of debt, you said, and you still had the artist mentality, the pain of your father's situation. You met Mark, who you pretty much realized he was on the same, well, different, but he was the man for you. How did you get your base business without, in very simple terms? If you had all that debt, what did you do? Just have to work for someone and earn bonuses for a bit to pay it off and live like a monk? So, the apex of my debt was December 05, January 06. Right at the time when obviously what happened with my dad. By the end of February 06, with Mark's help, I'd blagged a job for a property investment company who was selling property investments. And I figured I can learn on the job here because I wanted to learn about property. And this guy, Mark, is really interesting to me, and we're building a bit of a friendship, and he seems to know what he's talking about, and he's got quite a few properties already, and he's a similar age. So there was that. And then I thought, I didn't tell them this, but I was prepared to work for free, commission only, through the day, and then evenings and weekends I'd do my art because I was kind of doing my art anyway. But they gave me a job minimum wage. So I think it was £4 or £5 an hour back then. But they would pay me £500 a commission for a deal done. Now, by the way, this was a complete blag. Mark blagged it, I blagged it, and our boss then, Terry, thought, well, what have I got to lose? I'm only paying a minimum wage. I'm glad I didn't tell him I'd work for free. And I had no sales experience, no training on the phone, nothing about property. So Mark sort of took me under his wing and he's like, right, Rob, you want to do this? You want to sell these deals? These are the deals that sell well. Stick to the UK. Get on some sales training. Learn sales from this guy. Buy these CDs, these audios. Jump on this course. And I was just learning on the job. I was learning about property on the job, learning about selling, on the phone to people on the job. About July, August that year, I'd done quite a few sales and Mark was teaching me about managing money. So instead of just spending it, I was knocking off the credit cards or saving the money. Mark was helping me look at getting a remortgage for the house I lived in because I had a ridiculously high mortgage because I didn't have any clue about money. And then there was a speaking opportunity that came up. So basically, we had an opportunity to stand on a stage in front of 250 people and do a talk and sell our property deals. And both Mark and Terry, my boss, didn't want to do it. They made out that they did, but they didn't. And I just put my hat in the ring and said, fuck it, I'll do it. And then that was the first time I was really able to do something that neither of those could. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to add some extra value. And I went and did the speech and I went and did a course and learned public speaking. I actually went to do the course in Australia. I got my boss to pay for I paid for the flights and he paid for the accommodation and the course. And we did a little joint venture. And I did this public speaking and I sold some property deals from the stage to, 250 people and I got paid a load of commission. So I learned the art of one-to-many, not one-to-one. And by the end of that year, I'd probably earn not quite 100 grand, but it weren't far off.
and I'd picked off most of my debt, and I'd remortgaged my properties and my property, and I'd got my I'd paid off some of my credit cards, and I'd got my interest and my overheads down. I actually had enough money, and I bought a Nissan 350Z with the proceeds of the sales I'd done. And I pretty much got myself, not quite, but I was nearly clear by then. By the end of that year, Mark and I had been planning to, because we'd figured out a few things, and a few things weren't right in that company. So in January 2007, we set up Progressive Property, our company, where we decided to sell properties, but we wanted local older properties, not overseas off-plan developments. And so then we were doing it for ourselves. So we're making a lot more of the money, not doing it for someone else. So instead of getting 500 quid a commission, Mark and I would get 1,500 quid each for selling a property deal. And because we didn't have any overhead, we were able to take most of that. So in the early months of that company, I whacked off all my debt. So maybe 12 to 16 months, I got rid of all the debt, and then we were clear. And because there was only me and him, we didn't have much overhead. And then we did our first ever course, and we made about 25 grand net each on that. Because again, we weren't paying staff or overhead or anything like that. And then it all built from there.
But interesting, you bought yourself a swanky car while you were still paying off the debt. So clearly you still...
I'd pretty much cleared it. I bought it with cash.
Oh, okay. So yeah. You've still... So in other words, this is interesting, as you've gone through your wealth building and your earning, how have you... One of the biggest problems, I've met people who are high earners, have still never built wealth because they're spending every penny that comes in, right? How have you managed to make sure that the wealth is always ahead of the lifestyle, if you will?
Yeah. Okay. So you need to know what you spend every month. So you need to have a clear budget and an eye on your money. And people who earn a lot of money, because they earn so much money, they sort of almost think that budgeting is beneath them, or that they don't need to, or they can be quite chaotic, disorganized, because I can be that too. So the first thing is you've got to know what your personal overheads are, and you've got to know what your budget is. This sounds like such an obvious thing, but it's a fundamental rule of money. Never spend more than you earn. Never spend more than you earn. Never spend more than you earn. And a lot of people are spending 120% of what they earn every month, so they're building debt. Whereas if you spend 80% of what you earn every month, that'll compound the other way. So that's the second thing. The third thing is you've got to preserve capital. So if you put capital into a 50 grand car that is 20 grand in 3 years, you've turned that 50 grand into 20 grand, and you've got the ongoing management and maintenance and insurance and petrol and everything else.
You bought a liability
of the car. Exactly. Yeah. Whereas if you put that 50 grand into a property that appreciates to 200 grand in 20 years and produces income. So by the way, at some point you're going to want to buy things. But if you buy things with either minimal capital outlay or things that don't erode in value. So I like hi-fi, and I buy hi-fi equipment. I have a £250,000 hi-fi system. But if I sold that, I'd get probably £225,000 back. Whereas you could easily buy a hi-fi system for £250,000 that in 3 years would be worth 100 grand. When I buy a watch, I buy Patek Philippe, Rolex, or Audemars Piguet, and they usually go up in value. I buy stuff secondhand. I buy clothes in the sales often, so I often buy McQueen at 40% off. So what I'm trying to do is preserve capital at all costs, because capital creates assets and assets produce income. But if you erode capital, you have nothing to build an asset to create income.
But that's the point I think was really well said. And I read it in your money book, was that it doesn't really matter what anyone else is doing with their lifestyle. You can still have nice things, but not at the expense of your capital base. And that's the point I think you're making, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So really, I look at my capital and I go, where do I want to move that capital to give me the lifestyle that I want, preserving it? So I had a pair of the speakers I had before, the ones I've got were called PMC, and they were £13,000 new, and I paid £7 for them, and I sold them for £8 3 years later. So basically, if you think about this, I got paid £1,000 to borrow a pair of speakers for 3 years. Now, if I'd have bought them new at 13 grand and sold them for 8, I'd have had to pay 5 grand to essentially rent those speakers for 3 years. People get ownership very confused. You don't own anything. You own nothing because when you die, it's all gone. So really all you do is rent things for an amount of time. You either rent it by renting it, or renting it by hire purchasing it, or renting it by leasing it, or renting it by exchanging your capital for it. So I look at everything as rental or temporary ownership. So how do I preserve the capital the most? So sometimes you'll hire purchase or you'll lease something. So Mark and I often lease cars. By the way, sometimes we put cash into cars as well. So I've got a 1987 Ferrari Testarossa, which I think will go up. And so I put cash into that. So that was 100, when I paid about all in 125 for that, 125,000. So that's all cash. But our Lamborghini Aventador, you're not going to put 300 grand into that because that is going to sink. So we got one, we paid 255 for a 320 grand car. And we put minimum deposit in it. So we're just paying the ongoing payments. So we're minimizing the amount of cash that we lose. And then if you have an asset that produces income that pays the monthly payments. So a lot of people will buy a 30 grand Merc. But what you can do is put money into a couple of houses to get 250, 300 pound net income. And then you can lease that 30 grand Merc for 250 pound a month. And then you can use the income from the properties to pay for the lease. And then you preserve capital.
What you're talking about funding lifestyle from assets. Yeah.
Exactly. So you basically pay for liabilities with assets. Now, by the way, I don't always get this right. So a couple of my watches have gone down, but most of them have gone up a lot. Before the lockdown, I sold a load of my Rolexes. I'd made 300 and 350% on them. Some of my hi-fi equipment, you know what, I'll struggle to get a bit of my money back, but others I get most of my money back. So the main things in my life that maybe give me joy, watches, cars, not including the house that you live in, that's obvious, but watches, cars, hi-fi, experiences. So if you can use income from assets to fund all those, you're preserving capital.
And just obviously, because I'm conscious of your time here, but you did touch on one live talk I heard you talking about how you were teaching your children about money. It's always a problem I've noticed. I mean, I have a very comfortable lifestyle, and I know many, many people who do. And even, people with modest lifestyles, but of nice living, they always struggle. A lot of people struggle with teaching money values to their children, so the children can stand on their own 2 feet and not be defined by their parents' success. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the thing with parenting, I want you to know I'm no guru parent. So you're asking, I'm just giving you my view and my opinion. I'm not saying this is fact, because I've got far more experience in entrepreneurship than I have in parenting. My children are 5 and 9. They're not 25. One thing I've discovered is most of the time, and I think people will agree with me with this, your kids don't listen to you, but they will do what you do. So the frustrating thing with being a parent is they can shout and scream at you 15 times and you're calm and measured. And then on the 15th time, you shout at them back and that's all they remember. So I think with children, they will copy what you do, not what you say. So what I'm trying to do with raising my kids is show them rather than tell them. Now, in the early years to my kids, I'd be telling them this and telling them that and giving them these tips and giving them these advice, which was really great. But I don't think they were listening to me because it comes from daddy. Whereas if you show them, I think that they get it more. So learning about money through playing games like Monopoly, or coming and viewing properties with me, or listening to podcasts and audiobooks in the car with me, or getting them involved in discussions that I have in the family and making them feel included. I think that serves them. So I tell my son about my properties and my daughter, but she's just a bit young at the moment. When we walk around town, I show him the properties that we've got. I try and get him to understand the concepts through experience. So that's the first thing. I also think you've got to understand what interests your kids and try and figure out how you want to raise them based on their interests. So at the moment, my son is interested in Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft. Now, we're hoping it's just a phase. It's lockdown. He does it with his friends. We've kind of let him. Come September, he's going to have no time to do that, and he's going to have to get back into football and golf and other things. But if I want Bobby to earn some money or understand the value of work or learning about money, I've probably got to relate it to Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, maybe get him to earn time on that by working, and then when he's working, getting paid for it and teaching him the value of work, teaching him that you get paid based on the value that you create, so not half doing jobs. If he does a half job, he gets paid half. If he does a full job, he gets paid full. But if he does more than he's asked for, he gets a bonus. So through these jobs and through this work, I'm trying to teach him all the things, because I believe in life, if you do a half job, you'll get half paid. But I've interviewed many billionaires, but one of them said to me, always do more than you're paid for and you'll get paid more. Whereas a lot of people are just looking to get paid for minimum work.
Yeah, always do your best work. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're paid to do the garden, if you're paid to do the back garden, do the front garden as well. And you know, and don't ask for any more money, but do more than you're paid for, and you'll get more, because people will go, bloody hell, he does more than he's paid for, and then you'll end up getting paid more. You'll get new jobs. But we all learn best and most, I believe, based on what's most important to us, based on our highest values. So I think the sweetest and most compelling influence is when we link what we want someone to do based on their most highest values, and then they're most likely to do it.
And just one thing I want to ask you before we sort of gradually wrap up is, there is a paradox where a lot of research shows that when people are higher earners and more wealthy, and this is obviously, there are variations, that people, because the value of their time is so much more economically higher, you know, it's more valuable financially, that paradoxically, a number of those people find it hard to actually use their time for the little things in life, because the cost of using that time for things other than economic return is so enormous. They get into that, not just not like hedonism of consumption. I'm talking here about they get into the loop of earning and earning and earning, because not earning, the cost of not earning is so high that they then can't take time out to take the dog for a walk or just sit and watch the river go by, or whatever it is, whatever trite thing you want to come up with. But I just wondered what your perspective is on that, being someone who does mix with billionaires and is very, very successful financially themselves.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm going to say is, I think if you look at anything and everything, it exists in a paradox. So I think if you're looking for a one-sided fantasy, i.e. money will make you happy, or you will retire when, I think that's a distraction and an illusion. I can't think of anything that's not a paradox. Put yourself out there on social media, build your brand, but attract loads of haters.
Yeah.
I just can't think of anything that doesn't have an equally balanced downside or upside. So I think understanding that everything is a paradox helps you get your head round imbalanced perceptions of extremes. I've certainly got into the addictive loop that I want to work more because there's more to chase. And every time you go up a level, you look at the next level rather than thinking, this is a level above where I wanted to be 12 months ago. But then that drive keeps you motivated and keeps you growing and keeps you contributing. You know, if you've got a meaningful product, if you want to sell 100 million of them, not 5 of them. The world will benefit from you selling 100 million of them, not 5 of them. And your reward will be linked to the value of the contribution and the number of people that you contribute to. So the world needs you to grow. But the growth paradox is, when does it end? And when do you find happiness? And what's the destination? Well, the answer is never. So the happiness is in the moment, not the future. So I think if people are feeling like I'm addicted to work, or I'm always chasing another level, or because I can earn really well, I need to maximize that, I think it is balancing, taking time to just be rather than to do. And maybe, for example, if taking the dog for a walk, you could listen to a podcast or an audiobook. So you could net time it.
There's a good one coming out soon, I know, yeah.
Yes, there is. I mean, I like to do these interviews in the garden. I know sometimes there's a bit of background noise, but I like being in the garden. I'm feeling relaxed, but I'm also doing this interview. So I think that's a nice trade-off, balancing passion, profession, work and play, you could argue. Because if I wasn't doing this interview, might I enjoy sitting in the garden? And this is apparently the hottest day of the year. Yeah, I'd enjoy that. I actually am doubling enjoying it. I'm also live feeding it to my Facebook page as well. So I think the hustle versus the rest, the do versus the be, the monetizing versus the giving. I think these are all paradoxes that exist. I work out 2.5 to 3 hours a day of my time where I'm purely donating it to help people, whether it's interviews, podcasts, one-to-one calls, pure contribution. And if I've ring-fenced that and set that, and I'm doing that with gratitude, I'm not like, oh man, I could be earning $5,000 in this hour. But for the other 5 hours or 6 hours or the rest of the hours I might decide to work, I'm selling my time. And I'm making
what
money.
You're saying is being intentional, realizing that life is shades of grey, and live in the moment as opposed to constantly chasing the dream, but still move forward. Okay, well, look, Rob, you have been an absolute mind. What do you want to leave everyone with before you go, before we say goodbye? Is there anything you want to leave with this message?
Yeah, I mean, I finish all my content with my saying, if you don't risk anything, you risk everything. But one thing I'd like to add, as we've been talking about money, is a lot of people say that money doesn't make you happy. I have never heard a rich person say that. I've only ever heard people who are kind of struggling financially. But what I will say is that money in and of itself won't make you happy. But embracing wealth and riches into your life under fair exchange, where you're giving value equal to the wealth that you're creating, creates and can help you create joy. And money tends to exaggerate traits, behaviors, or experiences in your life. So the more money that you have, it will accelerate your values and it will enhance your experiences. So really understand that whilst money won't make you more happy, it will accelerate and exaggerate your traits and experiences. So to create great experiences and to magnify great traits, money is an enabler and a fuel and an accelerator of those. And I think when you see it like that, you embrace more money in your life.
Absolutely. Well, Rob Moore, legend amazing money legend. Thanks very much for your time. And people, your website, what's your main website that people can go and check you out on and find out all about your stuff?
So robmoore.com, MOORE. You can find links to my books, my podcast, The Disruptive Entrepreneur, all my social media channels.
Yeah, absolutely. You've been very good with your time. Appreciate that, Rob. And it's been a pleasure to be with you. And I'll be following you with interest in the future.
Thank you very much.
You're a superstar. Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you want more money insights, do visit my website at jason-butler.com or connect with me on Twitter or Instagram at JB the Wealth Man. See you next time.